Roughly 9 years ago, I said remakes were getting out of hand. Here we are today, and things have only gotten worse. Now, before you think this is going to be another long-winded rant about awful remakes, let me tell you, it's not. I don't think remakes are without merit. I think the current wave of remakes are without merit. Remaking or rebooting everything that was once popular at some point. This trend was getting old 9 years ago, and I thought we would be past it by now, but no, we aren't even close. Now, I realize some of these points may seem a little redundant after the last video, but you know what else is redundant? Remaking Little Orphan Annie 5 times. While in the past we got a variety of films being updated for various reasons, they more often than not came out as their own things. I often cite the sci-fi horror remakes The Thing, The Fly, and The Blob as golden examples of how to do remakes that respect the original, but bring something new to the table, and they each stand on their own. You can watch the original and remake back to back and have two distinct experiences. Now we get pointless remakes that, more often than not, are just the exact same film with a new coat of paint. Oftentimes, they are vastly more expensive than the original, especially if they're a remake of a foreign film. Beyond that, we're being inundated with not just remakes of movies, but also TV shows. Although for the sake of time, I'm going to stay focused mostly on movies. For almost as long as there have been movies, there have been remakes. Most people were fine with this because it wasn't happening all the time. A remake once in a while, good or bad, was okay. However, things kicked into overdrive in 2020. The pandemic completely destroyed the Hollywood business model. With theaters closed, the studios lost billions. They need to recoup these losses, and instead of doing something intelligent, they, as they often do, are overcorrecting. They're releasing remakes and reboots of just about everything the various studios own. In a very short time, these companies stopped being studios and turned into nothing more than IP rights holder farms. Studios no longer want to create. They're simply absorbing properties that they can sit on and recreate as many times as necessary. Like a bizarre version of Pokemon, where they gotta catch all the existing properties and dole them out when needed. To them, they own an endless supply of material to just sell and resell to the audience. Something was popular once, so let's make it again. Then if that fails, just make it a TV series. And when it's no longer selling as well as it used to, we'll just reboot it. With Disney buying 20th Century Fox, they've reduced the number of big movie studios in Hollywood from 6 down to 5. Now we have Warner Brothers, Sony, Universal, Paramount, and of course, Disney. Warner Brothers has been making massive blunder after massive blunder, and there's been a long-running rumor that this is to place them in a position where they have to sell. So don't be surprised if Hollywood is down to 4 major studios within the next few years. Back in the day, we had remakes that were made with the best of intentions. In 1989, Michael Mann made a movie called LA Takedown. It was originally a pilot for a TV series that was reworked into a standalone movie for NBC when it wasn't picked up. Mann wasn't happy with the production, so he used the foundation as a blueprint for the theatrical film Heat. With Heat, he got bigger actors, a much bigger budget, and almost doubled the runtime. He fixed the problems he had with LA Takedown, which, to be perfectly honest, is still a pretty good film. Now, we're being inundated with remakes that don't make sense. A variety of studios have been trying to remake The Crow for well over a decade. Jason Momoa was originally attached, and they were 5 weeks out from filming when production was halted over some internal disagreements. The studio forged ahead and somehow made a film that looks even worse than the one that they had previously planned. Why would they redesign Eric Draven to look like a cross between Post Malone and the Jared Leto Joker? Alex Proyas, the director of the original, even came out to say that this whole thing was a terrible idea. He'd been against the remake from the beginning and tried on numerous occasions to stop it. The Crow is one of the films I consider to be off-limits to remakes. Why? First off, the obvious. It was Brandon Lee's last film due to his tragic death while filming. The second reason is, the original film is just perfect. It encapsulates the world at the time with everything from the soundtrack to the atmosphere. Some movies exist in a period of time, and trying to recapture that decades later is doomed to failure. Would a Casablanca remake make sense now? Gone with the Wind? The Godfather? There is nothing they can do to improve these films. You can't recapture that magic. All you can do is make an inferior version of a superior film. One of the biggest arguments for this sort of thing was that the remake was being made to appeal to a new generation. We need to take this popular thing and remake it for this generation. Why? Does this generation not want its own original property? Why are they only getting something updated instead of something original that they can call their own? Are there no good stories left? The other is to fix it for modern audiences. If the property is a beloved classic that has survived for years, why do you think now is the time to reframe it? So some hack is going to go back and rewrite a classic and fix it? That's just insulting to the original and to the audience. How about instead of taking a good movie and making it bad, you take a bad movie and make it good? Since Disney is insisting on remaking movies from Fox's catalog, which they now own, why don't they think outside of the box and fix some broken movies? Instead of remaking Die Hard or Home Alone, why not remake one of their flawed productions? It's not like Fox doesn't have a warehouse full of movies that, for whatever reason, ended in disaster. Take that remake money and fix some broken movies. Wouldn't you rather see a proper version of Titan AE instead of another live-action Jungle Book? A more recent trend we're now getting is the reboot in the form of a late sequel. After the success of the late sequel reboot of Halloween, NBC Universal wasn't looking to launch a new property. They started searching for another classic franchise to resurrect. They spent $400 million to acquire the rights to the Exorcist franchise, a franchise that really shouldn't even be a franchise at all. They planned for another trilogy and started with Exorcist Believer, which was directed by David Gordon Green, who did the Halloween 2018 trilogy. $400 million, and what did they get? A critical and financial failure. Exorcist Believer made $136 million worldwide. Critics and audiences hated it. So now they have to justify this gigantic money pit they signed on for 3 films and somehow recoup this massive loss within 2 more films. Mind you, the $400 million wasn't their production budget. The $400 million was simply how much it cost to attain the rights. They still have to dump however much more into these films to get them made, which apparently for part 1 was $30 million, not including the marketing. Blumhouse, who's making these films with Universal, seems to have missed the mark on this. They are going too far into more expensive films. Wouldn't the smarter thing to do be to continue the original plan of making smaller films that have a higher chance of return on investment? That was the initial foundation of Blumhouse. Something like Happy Death Day, a film that cost $5 million to make and pulled in $125 million. While Happy Death Day is not 100% original, it's a repurposing of Groundhog Day as a horror film. It's still its own thing that is genuinely more enjoyable and unique than the vast majority of soulless remakes. With $400 million, they could have made 80 Happy Death Days. Think about that. Making a variety of smaller films is a much smarter plan, and it not only increases the chances of having a hit, it also creates the possibility for a new franchise. I know I go back to it a lot, but Paranormal Activity initially cost $15,000. They put a few $100,000 into reshoots, and it became a billion-dollar franchise, which is getting revived as a video game, and the film series will most likely be rebooted. The Terminator was a $6.4 million indie film that started a billion-dollar franchise. Skydance currently owns the franchise, and with the last movie underperforming, it most likely will be rebooted. Since Blumhouse is now finished with Halloween, they auctioned the film series off, and there was a bidding war over who would become the new owners. If The Exorcist sold for $400 million, can you imagine what Halloween sold for? So expect to be inundated with more Halloween reboots coming very soon. I guess Blumhouse is taking some of that money and putting it into a new partnership with Lionsgate. It was just announced Blumhouse and Lionsgate are launching a reimagining reboot of the Blair Witch Project. What exactly is the point of this? Years ago, I did a lengthy video discussing the impact of the Blair Witch Project and how it was a movie that was lightning in a bottle. The brilliant marketing is largely what helped it to become one of the most talked about films of the year, and there's no way they'll ever be able to recapture that. I know Lionsgate has been trying to make the Blair Witch Project into a multimedia powerhouse for years. That is, they want movies, video games, TV shows, and whatever else they can squeeze out. Mike Mignola and Ben Rock, the co-producer and production designer of the original, were both openly expressing on Twitter how they thought this was a bad idea. They stated after the many times the franchise has been fumbled, why not bring in the original creators and let them have a crack at it? That sounds a million times better than reintroducing this horror classic for a new generation. Something that's even scarier, however, is buried in the article. The Blair Witch Project movie will be the first film in a multi-picture pack with Blumhouse, reimagining horror classics from the Lionsgate library. I can only imagine what movies they're going to do. If Saw wasn't still raking it in at the box office, that would have been most likely the first to go. Instead of giving the audiences something new, Hollywood seems determined to just recycle the past. Where does this all end? They just announced, of all things, a Scary Movie remake. That makes the least amount of sense. It was made at a time when we were getting inundated with meta horror films, and it was poking fun at that. Now what are they going to lampoon? Oh boy, I can't wait to see a Billy Puppet wearing a 3 Body Problem t-shirt and making some reference to Squid Game and Tiger King. This leads me down another bad road that Hollywood seems determined to go down. That, believe it or not, ties into remakes. AI. The studios want AI because they can eliminate that pesky creative element, the actual filmmakers. AI doesn't create, it just recycles pre-existing things. They can feed an old movie into it, and out the other end, it'll spit a reimagining that'll make the executives happy. It's like that episode of South Park with Cartman giving the studio endless Adam Sandler films. If you think some executives aren't furiously trying to figure out how to make an entire film with AI, you are being willfully ignorant. There are already some people online cheering this on. However, that is a much larger conversation that's out of the scope of what I'm talking about here, but I did want to mention it. Back to remakes. I see a lot of people arguing that remakes are fine because the original still exists, which yes, this is true. There is a larger problem with this though. When you choose to remake an existing film, that means you are actively refusing to make an original film. In some cases, like I previously mentioned, they're actively refusing to make multiple films. The majority of these remakes are taking well-established properties and throwing piles of money at them. They remade The Color Purple. Why? You gonna improve on a film that won 14 industry awards and was nominated for another 25? Red Sonja is being made with an alternate origin and a completely different story, so it, according to the article, won't appeal to the male gaze. Why make it then if it's not Red Sonja? Why not make some new sword and sorcery story with an original female barbarian? Are they unaware of the overwhelming success of Xena? Although Red Sonja could fall under the taking a bad movie and improving it, but everything I've seen about this says otherwise. After the success of It was announced there would be remakes of pretty much every Stephen King property that was previously made. Again, why? Stephen King has a large catalog of novels and short stories, many of which have never been made into films. Why not focus on those? Why remake Christine, Pet Sematary, Salem's Lot, and Firestarter? I'd much rather they do Eyes of the Dragon instead of a remake of The Running Man. The Running Man is already a great movie. Do something else! Let's not forget Disney's insistence on making live-action remakes of their animated films. After the success of Beauty and the Beast, they announced they would be remaking all of their animated films as live-action. They're doing this whether anyone wants them or not. So soon we'll be graced with The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Lilo and Stitch, and The Sword and the Stone. Recently, we had The Lion King, Mulan, Aladdin, and The Little Mermaid. These movies cost hundreds of millions of dollars and have had no impact. They came, a bunch of people went to see them, and then promptly forgot about them. When anyone talks about these films, they're talking about the animated versions. If they do end up discussing these, it's usually with disdain. Also, since Hollywood thinks American audiences can't read subtitles, we are getting remakes of a wide assortment of foreign films. Train to Busan is a brilliant zombie horror film from 2016 that has been remade into Last Train to New York. The Swedish film A Man Called Ove from 2015 was remade in the US as A Man Called Otto in 2022. A Man Called Ove had 29 award nominations and 15 wins. I don't know what the budget was for A Man Called Ove, but I can guarantee it wasn't nearly as much as Otto, which cost $50 million. Force Majeure, another Swedish film from 2014, was remade in the US in 2020 as Downhill. Some foreign movies get a buzz going, and the studios buy the rights to the American remake before the film is even finished. Brand new properties like Speak No Evil, a Danish film from 2022, Blumhouse bought the rights in 2023, less than a year after the film was released, and it's slated to hit theaters this September. The original cost $3.2 million, and I guarantee the remake is probably quadruple that. Plus, the original is almost entirely in English, so this isn't even a subtitles thing.
You made it! Sorry for the mess. It's gonna get much worse. Come on.
Imagine if some major studio bought the rights to Parasite and remade it here in Hollywood. We would have been robbed of the brilliant original, which never would have won Best Picture at the Oscars. Although they aren't giving up. It seems instead of a movie remake, they're making a TV series for HBO Max that takes place in the Parasite universe. Are there good remakes? Yes, they happen, which is why I'm saying they still should exist. The Dune readaptation seems to be doing well. Sorcerer is a great remake of The Wages of Fear from 1953. The first remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers is outstanding and definitely stands on its own. Rise of the Planet of the Apes was way better than I think anyone was expecting. The Ring, I think, is arguably the only J-horror remake to be done right. However, for every good remake, there are an overwhelming number of bad ones. They need to put the brakes on this trend because it's getting ridiculous. This is just some of the movie remakes or reboots that have either recently been released or are coming within the next 2 years. Hercules, Bambi, The Aristocats, Robin Hood, Moana, Snow White, Wonka, The Thing, Mean Girls, The Fall Guy, Garfield, Twisters, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, Dirty Dancing, Christine, Commando, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Highlander, Logan's Run, Cliffhanger, The Cat in the Hat, Hellboy, Clue, Salem's Lot, Short Circuit, Jacob's Ladder, Flight of the Navigator, Firestarter, I Am Legend, Big Trouble in Little China, White Men Can't Jump, The Grudge, Harvey, Three Men and a Baby, The Strangers, The Karate Kid, Twilight, Harry Potter, a Naked Gun remake, Roadhouse, The Never-Ending Story, and many more. Not to mention however many horror movies Blumhouse is going to remake for Lionsgate. The Blair Witch remake is just the tip of that iceberg. I realize some of these may not happen, but the fact that they're even on the table should be concerning. Need I remind you, it took over 10 years to make the Crow reboot. So just because one version falls apart doesn't mean another won't pop up later. Hollywood isn't alone in remakes, but they are by far the guiltiest of doing ones that don't need to be. There's no shortage of fresh, original material out there, and yet we keep getting the same stories over and over. Was it really necessary to remake The Great Gatsby 4 times? Audiences aren't innocent, though. On social media and sites like Reddit, there are posts of people talking about movies that need to be remade. Most of them do not need to be remade. Why do companies keep doing this? Let's look at the numbers. I think the fact that The Lion King was the second highest grossing film of 2019 and Aladdin was the 9th makes it look like the studios may be correct. However, keeping it in the same studio, look at The Little Mermaid remake. The rule of thumb is a movie needs to make double, sometimes triple its budget in order to break even. The equation is budget plus marketing times 2 equals break even. Since with some of these we don't know how much money went into marketing, it's usually distilled to the budget times 2.5 equals break even. So The Little Mermaid pulled in $568 million, which is a lot of money. However, it cost $242.2 million to make. That means they needed to make $600.5 million just to break even. The original Little Mermaid cost $40 million, and not including the times it was re-released, it made $184 million. So with the formula, that means it needed $100 million to break even. Therefore, it made an $84 million profit. Keep in mind, this was back when movies weren't pulling in hundreds of millions of dollars every week. It only opened in 994 theaters, as opposed to the remake, which opened in 4,320. Dumbo cost $170 million and made $353.3 million. What it needed was $425. Taking these giant risks on these kind of movies just isn't sustainable. People are already tired of remakes, and yet more are announced every day. I've had to update this video 4 times just in the past 2 weeks because of all the remake announcements. If you're tired of this, there's something you can do. Stop watching these things. Beyond that, for the love of God, stop hate watching things. The studios don't care if you're watching to enjoy or hate watching. It all adds up to a view. Hate watching is what got Velma a 2nd season. Reward originality. If you see something new that looks good, watch it, and if it is indeed good, talk about it. This maybe will get the message through. Although this is Hollywood and they all too often get the message wrong. Hence why Squid Game is getting an American remake. Instead of watching every remake that comes along, why not check out some of the countless amazing original films that get released all over the world? Bong Joon-ho, the director of Parasite, put it perfectly. He said, "Once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films. I am the world's slowest reader, and if I can keep up with subtitles, so can you." I'll end with this. I understand, at the end of the day, this is a business. However, there needs to be a balance between the business and the art. Too much of either usually ends with something that doesn't appeal to anyone. However, I'll side with art 100% of the time. Art gives us movies like Hero and Fantastic Mr. Fox. Business gives us things like the RoboCop remake. When you ask someone what their favorite movie of all time is, how often is it a remake? Not saying it doesn't happen, but the reality is, the movies that resonate with us the most are the original ones. Yes, I know Godzilla Minus One is a remake/reboot. However, it follows the rule of not just being a lazy remake, but a new take on the source material. It also cost $12 million, whereas the American remake sequel, Godzilla x Kong, cost $150 million. Guess which one got an Oscar for Best Visual Effects? Remakes don't need to stop. The sheer volume of remakes needs to stop. Yes, there is the argument that the original still exists, but it also exists alongside these other films. When you do a search for a classic film, don't be surprised when the remake shows up first. It has to be maddening for directors who make a landmark film only to see it paraded around later like a skin suit. William Friedkin, the director of the original Exorcist, said, "The guy who made those new Halloween sequels is about to make one to my movie, The Exorcist. That's right, my signature film is about to be extended by the man who made Pineapple Express. I don't want to be around when that happens, but if there's a spirit world and I can come back, I plan to possess David Gordon Green and make his life a living hell." Friedkin died 2 months before the release of Exorcist Believer. No word on if he's haunting Green or not.